I want to tell you about a magical place. This place has areas that are so cold that there are penguins, and it also has areas that are so hot that there are deserts. This place is Chile, and I want to tell you about that today because I had the opportunity to live there for 2 years as an LDS missionary and really get involved in the culture, which is very different from our own. And I'd like to tell you about the culture by addressing three areas. The first would be the music, dance, and football. The second is the arts and crafts. And the third is the food. To begin with, the Chileans are obsessed with football to an extent that the rest of South America, I don't think, is. For example, I bought this in a grocery store. There were 1,000 more just like it with different iterations of the cover. And you can find things like this any time of the year, any shop, whether it's a grocery store, a hardware store, there's something football related there. And even all of the kids that you'll see out playing, they're always playing football. It's really interesting. The Chileans also love to sing and dance, which I think is really neat because that's not as big of a deal to us here in the US. But every kid that is growing up in Chile learns to sing and dance, to the extent that Chile actually has their own national dance called La Cueca, which I do know how to dance. There won't be a demonstration of that right now, but it is a very fun dance and very interesting to watch as well. I would imagine that among those people who are obsessed with football and like to dance, there's probably an amount of people that they find other ways to contribute, and they do that by contributing to the arts and crafts of Chile. So the first thing I'd like to show with the arts and crafts is Condorito, which stands for Little Condor. This is a Chilean comic book. It's the most widely read comic in all of South America. And the Condorito is actually a representation of the Chilean people. So it's actually very fascinating. And it's actually pretty edgy for what it is. And everybody reads it. There's a weekly edition of this that's put out every single week. Also, they have a mercado, which is a market. And in there, you'll find all sorts of stuff. These are coasters. They're made of leather. Even the little package for them is made of leather. And you can find all sorts of things that are made out of leather. There's also a lot of clothing in the mercado. These are some socks. They're made out of llama's wool. They are the warmest things I've ever put on my feet, to the extent that I would say the only way to describe these is it's like having a llama on your foot. It's pretty incredible, actually. Now, I would imagine that there's also other people that can't feel they contribute to the soccer or to the comic books or to the clothing and that kind of thing. So they find an additional way to contribute, which is the food. And the Chilean food is very interesting because it's very influenced by Spanish culture. A lot of European immigration brought new styles and new flavors and things like that. So I want to tell you about some of my favorites. The first being bistec a lo pobre, which stands for the poor man's steak. And so you'll have to imagine this with me. It is a steak with 2 fried eggs, French fries, and rice. And while it doesn't sound that groundbreaking, when you break into those eggs and the yolk runs over all the rest of the food and you get a little bit in each bite, it is life-changing. And people still look at me strange because I almost always eat my steak with eggs on top. The second food would be something called mote con huesillo, which is a peach drink. And the huesillo part of that means bone. And so they actually take some whole peaches, put them in a drink, and at the bottom they'll have a bunch of wheat floating there. And the wheat, it's little tiny pieces of wheat, and it looks like bones. It's kind of cryptic. It's really tasty, but it's very strange to look at first. And lastly, with the food, and certainly not least, are the dulces. And I have here a wrapper. I've had this for a long time. We've been through a lot. This was my favorite candy to eat. It's not really candy as much as it is an ice cream treat. And when it's super hot outside and you can go eat a Mustang, it is one of the best things ever. So in conclusion, I hope I've taught you a little bit today about the music and dance of Chile, their infatuation with football, which most of South America has, some of their arts and crafts, and finally their food. 5 minutes is difficult to tell you about the Chilean culture because there's a lot to it. But I hope that you've seen a little bit now. And if you ever get the chance to go there, you should, because you'll get an experience that's very different from any other country in South America.